This is probably one of the biggest contributor to the number one reason why startup fails.
Hey everybody, my name is Andrew Tran. I'm a marketing branding strategist. I help organizations, their teams, their team leaders deliver and execute on the challenges they're facing, from marketing campaigns to market entry activity, all the way through to strategy and planning. If you want to hit me up, check out my website. It's www.andrewtran.asia. You can find out a little bit more about me. You can book time with me. But until then, let's get on with the show. My next guest is Jonathan Chak. He's an entrepreneur, having started multiple businesses in various industries. He's a growth hacker. He's also a startup consultant based in Sydney, Australia, by way of Hong Kong. Jonathan also has extensive experience working with the Australian government, assisting entrepreneurs access government grant funding. He's currently a startup coach at the University of New South Wales, helping hundreds of founders with their startup journey. Our chat was awesome. We got to talk about his career up to date, how he got into the startup scene, how that kind of led to his work with the government, and also how he's now like a mentor and advisor for entrepreneurial programs in the University of Sydney and University of New South Wales. Finally, we talked about his foray into the coffee business. That's an interesting chat in itself, but without further ado, give it up for Jonathan Chak. Firstly, I want to say thank you for coming on.
No problem, my pleasure.
No worries. And I think what you have, your story as a business owner, but also what you're doing right now is so relevant to what everyone's going through, whether or not they're in startup world or they're an organization, like large organization, or even a small organization, like an established small business. I think what you have from a story perspective and your experience and knowledge around operations is so important. But for those who aren't familiar with your work, would you be able to let people know what you do?
Sure, yeah. So currently I am a startup coach at one of the universities in Australia. It's University of New South Wales. We've got a program called the Founders Program, where we have different accelerators, and coaching services available for the university students, alumni, or current staff who wants to embark in their entrepreneurial journey. If they're just starting out, they have a startup idea and they don't know where to go, they can come to the Founders Program, book a one-on-one with coaches like myself. We can talk you through it. If you, face roadblocks, we can give you advice and connect you to the right people. So that's my day-to-day job right now. Prior in joining the university, I've spent some time with the Australian state government, the New South Wales state government, in one of the teams where we give out government grant funding to early stage startups and helping them to build their first product. It's called the MVP grant for very obvious reasons, obviously. And during my time with the state government, I have assessed over 500 grant applications from startup founders, and I work very closely with them, helping them with their application and answering any questions. And that's how I got to hear a lot of startup stories, and the new ideas. I'm virtually at the cutting edge of what the Australian startup ecosystem is happening. So that was a very insightful experience for me as well. So I've got experience with government and the university, but that's only my recent years, right? Prior to that, I'm actually a startup founder myself. For the last 15 years, I've built 5 businesses myself, failed many times, raised capital, failed more, and was lucky to have a small exit with one of my businesses. Mm-hmm. So I was able to, accumulate 15 years of operational experience, how we get started with a startup, some of the really painful lessons learned, and translate that into helping the next generation of entrepreneurs in Australia, at least for now, through the government and the university channel. And now, I fully realize that's my passion, and I've been, very involved with the education space in, bringing the new generation of entrepreneurs out there. So currently I'm developing my own online course, literally titled Test Your Own Idea and Build Your First Product Within 4 weeks. And yes, you don't need to code. yeah, hopefully I can share some of my experience and some of the lessons learned here today with you and the audience.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's amazing that you've had to assess over 500 applicants, right, when you were doing your time over at the state government. What was some of the things that you got out of it that that would help like startups now with regards to either general grant funding from a small business perspective, or trying to get VC funding in general?
Right. Okay. I guess we'll start from the beginning. The biggest myth out there, right, with entrepreneurs I have an idea and I want to build a product, right? The typical scenario is I have an idea. I've done a lot of research. I've read numerous industry reports. I've pulled out all the numbers. I've done a lot of modeling, analysis, and stuff like that. I've talked to friends and families. I've talked to some potential customers. I've done surveys, focus groups, and my idea is fully validated. I've also done 3 years of financial projections, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to be a big hit. So all I need right now is find me a tech co-founder, because I'm not a coder, right? We just need someone technical to build a solution for me, or get me some funding so I can build a solution and push it out there to the market. So that's the typical scenario. 9 times out of 10, for every 10 startup founders that I met, 9 of them fits into that category. There's nothing wrong with that, because that we all start somewhere. And when I first started, I kind of believe in that as well. But this is probably one of the biggest contributor to the number one reason why startup fails in the entire world. Like, that is no market need. We always go out there to build products that nobody wants. So with my experience going through 500 grant applications, like a lot of them actually falls into this category. And with my coaching through the university, I've coached over 100 founders one-on-one. Again, 9.5 out of 10 of them actually fits into that category. So that has got me to develop my own online course in preaching, what exactly should you do when you have that idea moment? Yep. We shouldn't start from a destination perspective. Usually when we have an idea moment, we vocalize it in terms of a solution. I want to build a platform. I want to build this widget. I want to build this, that, right? But we never really talk through our rationale in understanding a problem and who the customers are, what their motivations are, why do they have this problem, and what kind of solutions they need, and what's the motivation behind, that change, right? Usually we start it's all about change, and change of behavior is a disruption. We change the way the supply chain actually works in particular industry. Like, what's the actual motivation? I think this is an extremely important point. Like, most people focus on the solution, but not the motivation.
Right. And do you find, like, is there a system that you kind of teach to help potential founders validate their problem and how they solve it into the market?
Yes, I do, because I agree. Like, I found that having frameworks or methodology or structure content, it's easier to follow for first timers. That's why I have developed the 6 steps MVP letter. So nice. It's from your idea moment until you're permitted to go out there and build your first product. Like, there's 6 steps in there. I've got some templates and methodologies to guide you through. How can you actually go through your idea and list out all of the assumptions very quickly, so you know exactly what you are assuming and what actually are facts, and how do we define the first group of people that we're going to test with. I call them the guinea pigs. That's with a lot of scientific experiments. So this is all based on the lean startup methodology, where it's a scientific methodology to test out business ideas. And then as you go through the MVP letter, you go through checkpoints. We do different exercise to validate the problem. And until you get to a certain point, I also have some material in helping the non-coders out there. How do we actually stitch up an MVP, using existing tools? It's actually easier than we think, but most people, when we think of an idea, go, oh, no, actually, I need to find a guru, a coder to build a solution for us. But, in a testing phase, you don't really need that.
Yeah, that's cool. And I like the fact that you mentioned lean design. For anyone who's kind of listening at home, like lean design is a methodology that kind of helps. I think it was developed by Ash Muria, and it was helped to kind of develop to figure out, whether or not a particular idea had legs in it, and there was some checkpoints around it. Since then, people have looked at it, taken it, and modified it to their approach. I know Atlassian has done that kind of experience design, and they've modeled it too. I've done it myself. I've modeled it and to make it work more so from a business marketing perspective, not so much from an MVP startup perspective, but still the same principles. Understanding who your target audience is and understanding the problem of which you're trying to solve and the hypothesis around that. So I think it's really cool that you're using a lean design kind of aspect as well. Which kind of leads me to, you mentioned before, like you're at the forefront when it came to like the startup culture mentality in Sydney. I know that you also did something like in Hong Kong as well, like a startup through there. Would you be able to shed some light? Because that's pretty interesting, man.
Right. So my venture in Hong Kong is not so much a startup. It's just a typical cafe. Like, we all had a dream of, opening our own cafe and do things a certain way. And that's exactly what I did. I brought Australian coffee over to Hong Kong in a particular way that we do it. Like it was 2013, 14. It's quite recent. So I'm definitely not the pioneer in bringing Australian coffee to Hong Kong. And Hong Kong has very, very good coffee anyway. Locally, like their brewers and stuff like that. But the thing is, it all started with the trip. Like I was born in Hong Kong and came to Australia 20-something years ago. But I visit Hong Kong frequently on an yearly basis, sometimes twice a year, to visit families and just holidays, whatever. And it all started with one of the trips. I was just strolling along Quarry Bay with one of my friends. So Quarry Bay is in the Hong Kong Island on the eastern side, where there is a hub there with a lot of big corporates and AAA buildings and those kind of, it's a commercial area. And was just strolling along, and I was going through these because in Hong Kong, like you don't walk on the street, like you go through commercial buildings. They've got tunnels and escalators, so you can actually go inside through the buildings. You don't have to be exposed to the sun and the rain and all that. So it's very indoorsy. So walking through, and I go, very interesting. Like there are a lot of AAA grade buildings where in the lobby is so empty. Why don't you throw a cafe in there? In Australia, we have those coffee cart stuff, like, it's 40 years ago. Like, you just pull a bucket of water, you plug it into your coffee machine. You don't even need power, that kind of thing, right? And that's how we've been doing coffees, like, for the last few decades. And I go, maybe it'll be interesting to do that coffee cart thing in Hong Kong. Because one of the biggest challenge in running a business in Hong Kong is the hefty rent, right? It's all about the real estate, and on the streets, like the rent is extremely high, but people still rent it because there's high traffic. So I was going, okay, if there is that's my idea moment. What if the rent inside those AAA buildings are extremely affordable? Because they are not utilizing that space anyway. And just from that what if statement, I packed my bags, left my wife and my 2-year-old son in Sydney. Well, of course, we had that conversation. They are fully supportive of me doing that, but like for theatrical purpose, like I packed my bag, left them there, and fly to Hong Kong and started my coffee venture with one of my partners whom I met in Australia 20 years ago, but he went back to Hong Kong. So we were partnering, and he was the one who's more familiar with Hong Kong, and I was kind of bringing that entrepreneur what if spirit into it, and we were just basically hustling. We went to the real estate company, like they're the biggest developer in Hong Kong, and we just went up to them and 20, 40, 50 phone calls before we reach the right person. They pass you around, and it was literally cold calling. Like, we don't know anyone in that company. So we tried all we can, go through LinkedIn, go through all the business cards that we have, try to find that right person and say, hey, I want to rent a space in your lobby. And one thing leads to another. We finally got to them and started having that discussion. And we were able to come up with a solution where they are happy with. Because normally when you start a cafe, you have to drill things, you have to lay cables and stuff like that. And that's exactly what they don't want to do. But they want extra revenue. So we were able to, find that problem solution fit and say, okay, this is a solution that we're going to offer. We're not going to drill any holes because we're going to take this, old methodology, from 4 decades ago from Australia. We're just going to use our own methodology, and we're going to keep this clean and everything. And if you don't like us 1 year later after our lease expires, you just kick us out, and you will have a clean and perfect lobby back for you. All right. So that's how we got in. Yes.
Wow, that's cool. And what was one of the big challenges when it comes to bringing Australian specialty coffee into Hong Kong? Like, did you have to go through quite a lot of customs issues or anything like that to bring Australian beans into Hong Kong?
Not particularly. Hong Kong has always been a free trade zone. So importing a lot of things into Hong Kong is quite straightforward. Like, you have to go through regularities, but it's relatively straightforward. Anyone can do it. And at the end, we decided to ship our coffee beans over there using DHL. It's probably one of the most stable and reliable courier companies out there. So for any mission critical logistics out there you need, I would strongly recommend DHL. Like, I'm not affiliated with them, but my experience with them is just great. So mission critical, you got to use the best. But not so much groups and loops that you have to go through.
Yep. And hindsight's always a great thing, right? But if you were to look back at it and you went, hey, if I had to do it again with the knowledge I have, would there be a couple of things you would change from a product design perspective, or even like a market launch aspect of it?
Probably not. Like, you always have to go through the same things and explore the problems and the challenges hands-on, to really pull things off, especially if this is another very interesting topic actually. In a startup scenario, it means that you are trying to do something that has not been done before, right? But to build a business, usually in traditional sense, you are following proven methodologies but replicating it in a different area. Like let's say, for example, property development. You choose the right land, you look at the zoning, you get constructions and DA approval and stuff like that, right? There's a standard procedures, and you can really forecast your earnings based on your forecast and planning and stuff like that, because it's been done so many times, right? It's nothing new about it. It's just a different council. You probably work with that council already. So those are more predictable. But in startup, like using Steve Blank's definition, it's a temporary organization to search for the repeatable and scalable business model, right? So the keywords are temporary and is to search. So I think like with any new idea, especially if it has not been done before, you got to go through those hoops and you got to go through those challenges yourself and, really take it on. Okay, well, okay, there's a roadblock. How do we get around it? Okay, now there's a roadblock because you don't understand certain things in that industry or in that context, or something that you don't understand about your customer. You got to go out and find out. Like, so if I was to do it again, I'll probably have to go through that same process, unless I guess to speed that up slightly, you pull in someone that has a lot of knowledge in that area. But the downside is they have already got a preconceived idea of how to do things in that industry. That's why they are so experienced, right? So how do we get the balance? Like, and at that time, we made a decision. Okay, we're not going to hire a consultant that has done it before in Hong Kong, because otherwise they would just do the same way, and without using some of their ideas that we've come up with to test it out. They'll never test it out. So yeah, that was the decision made.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's actually a really good segue from that. from a startup perspective and the mentality around that. You know, with Australia, like startup, and you also kind of read up what's happening around the startups, especially like in Southeast Asia where it's just booming at the moment. We've got some big ones here, like some couple of big unicorns from you know, from a logistics, like, you know, we got Grab, we got Gojek over in Indonesia as well. Is there some similarities that you kind of see between you know, the startup worlds, like that you observe either from you know, Australia versus Asia or Australia versus the US?
Right. Okay. I can only speak to the Australian startup ecosystem because that's where I'm in and I have the most insights into. And you know, other startup ecosystem around the world, I'm not especially, you know, familiar with. But you know, to give you some general observations is that, look, and everyone talks about it, the Australian market is too small, right? Like one fundamental concept in starting a startup and focusing it on Australian market is, okay, you might have product market fit in Sydney. Okay, you've got that, right? And now you go out and raise funds because you want to scale, right? Chances are you'll be able to scale to Melbourne, Brisbane, and Perth, right? Tassie maybe, right? That's about it. That's about it. Like, let's say you can capture, you know, 100% of the market. Like that's all you have. Okay, comparatively, in the States, let's say for example, you've got product market fit in New York. Then you go out and raise money. You can raise probably 10 times more than what you can raise in Australia because your product market fit is actually in New York. It means that it can very likely be scaled across other states or other cities around the states, which, you know, they have 300 million people and we've only got 25. So that is one thing that entrepreneurs need to really think about. You know, where's your starting point? Even if you're in Australia, like, does your idea actually work, you know, somehow online or, you know, in other parts of the world? And during that exploration process, I would encourage people to, you know, through social media, through online means, test other markets as much as possible, because you never know. Like, I tried one campaign previously and targeted the Africa region, and I was buying leads for as little as 2 cents a lead.
What?
Yeah,
That's
2 cents a
awesome.
lead, and I think I got 7,000 leads in 3 hours or something like that.
Right.
It was phenomenal. Like, it was so eye-opening. Like, that was my first time ever running ads campaign on Facebook targeting the African region. Right. You'll never be able to do that in Australia until you try. And what's 2 cents times 7,000, right? It's not a lot of money. And you can gain a lot of insights and, wow, okay, there might be some kind of opportunity there. So in a cross-border scenario, I think, yeah, that's probably one of the advantages that we have now, especially everyone's you know, stuck at home thanks to the pandemic, and it really, you know, forces us to, you know, think outside of our geographical region.
Yeah, actually, you come up with a really good point because, you know, I had a previous guest and they're specialized in the advertising kind of sector. And we were just talking about, hey, the difference between, say, you know, advertising in Asia or Southeast Asia in particular versus like other parts, like smaller countries like New Zealand or even Australia. And it's the volume. It's the amount of potential reach that you have, and the inventory, the amount of supply with regards to the inventory. So therefore, it just drives down the cost per click or the cost per acquisition or cost per lead really, really well, and becomes really cost effective when it comes to testing, like doing quick, you know, market tests to see if there's a bit of a fit within a certain geographical area. So I think that's really cool. I think that's something that, I mean, maybe you might be able to say, like, I would love to get your thoughts on it. It's something that I kind of see with startups here as well. When they start to, they're so enthralled with regards to their MVP that sometimes they may not have actually tried to test it out through digital means, because they're like, oh, we're in R&D mode. We want to make sure that our product is, you know, fit for market, and it's typically very biased because it's a very small subset of anecdotal kind of comments with regards to that particular product. And I just see, I mean, maybe, I mean, do you agree when it comes to that? Like sometimes startups or startup founders, they're so entwined with what they do and within work, they sometimes don't see the benefits of potentially scale through digital.
100%. And I think that is actually exactly the observation that I have, especially with very early stage founders. Like again, going back to my point of, most idea moments are vocalized in the form of solution, and at that point, people just want to focus on the solution and build that thing out and push it out to the market. That's the only way people think that and they can do to test out the market. But as a matter of fact, like, that's probably the worst way you want to test out your proposition. There's a number of other ways that you can put a proposition in front of someone to test whether they actually want your solution or not. Like one of the very clear example is when Uber first started. It was literally one car or two cars, one phone number. And it's a manual process. Like if you want a car and if you want someone to pick you up right now, call this number, we'll send someone over. Like that's exactly how they MVP it, right? They didn't build, all the bells and whistles, and they didn't have tons and tens of thousands of drivers around where you can just click a button and you can see in the map like where they are. No, none of that. Like it's basically a mobile number. That's the MVP. And I think a lot of startup founders like currently they've seen so much. Like 20 years ago is different because the internet was blank, so anything goes as long as you can figure out something that you can do on the internet. Like you got a chance, right? So a lot of the startup education around that's available out there are around it was developed 20 years ago. All that, pitch deck, and you got to be slick in your presentation, and you go out and pitch for funding, like those kind of things. Like it worked back then, like it worked. But does it work anymore? I don't think so. Like who's going to invest on an idea, right? No, not on the internet. I'm sorry, like no, because now the internet is regulated, it's saturated, it's got structures to it, and I guess that kind of leads to another observation that I have, which a lot of startup founders kind of overlook, especially in Australia. I'm always speaking back to Australian terms. Australia is a very stable country where we talked about the population is small, the market is small. That's why we cannot allow too many competition in this kind of market environment, right? So to create stability, obviously there are certain structures to it. And there are certain ways of, balancing that kind of economic benefits from both the government point of view and also in the corporate point of view. So looking at the Australian market is like there are only mostly 2 or 3 players in any industry, right? Big industries that we're talking about, just a few players. And for any startup to crack in, it basically is impossible if you do it the same way as what is already out there in the industry, and you're just trying to digitize it or throw in a couple of jargons in there. Like that's not going to cut it. And the more effective way is go really lean, and I would suggest go to grassroots. Get buy-in from users. When you get buy-in from users, the big guys will actually listen to you. But if you don't have anything, you just you have an idea or you have a platform, and then the typical scenario is like, oh, I've got this aged care solution, IoT for aged care. I know there are so many aged care, and I think the government really needs to look into this problem because it's a big problem, right? And we've got the solution. And okay, what's the solution? It's irrelevant. Like it doesn't matter like what the solution is. Even if you have a full-blown solution, it doesn't really matter because the government or the very established aged care facilities are not going to adopt a solution whom they have not they don't even know who you are, and you don't have track record. Like why should they put you on a tender list, right? It's just unrealistic. But if you have gone through the grassroots way, where you have used your solution and targeted to individual users who might be, living in aged care, or they're living at home but thinking to move to an aged care, something like that. I'm just making things up on the fly. But if you have targeted a lot of these customers and they all love your solution and they have used it, and all of a sudden you say, okay, we've got 5,000 individuals who are potentially your customers actually using our solution already, and when they're ready to move into your facility, imagine how you can actually accommodate their needs. And we've got this proven used by 5,000 people. If you want to have a chat, like, that's so much easier. I'm not saying that that's the way to go, but it's so much easier if I'm at least rated this way. So this is something first timers or early startup founders, they really have to consider. But I'm not sure like the exact situation over in Southeast Asia, but from what I'm hearing in some parts of the markets, there might be a little bit more room for competition. That's why you can still give it a crack. But in Australia, that's relatively hard.
Yeah, you're right. There is room to give it a crack in these markets in Asia, just because there's the pure population. Like, let's just take Vietnam, for instance. Their GDP growth is a fraction of what Australia is, but their population is almost 4 times the amount. It's about 90 mil, which like surprised the heck out of me. As a result, you have Uber try to make it in here, just got decimated, got taken over by Grab, which is basically the Uber. It's based in Singapore for anyone who's listening or watching. And then you've got GoViet, which is the Vietnamese joint venture kind of version of Gojek coming in. And these two guys, like from a logistics point of view, like ride hailing logistics point of view, is massive. Then you got a whole bunch. You got like these, I think it was like B, which is another one, which is the yellow. So basically you drive down like downtown Vietnam, and you just see a whole bunch of different colors, and you know exactly which brand they're in. It's just because there's so much, the population's so big, the cost to run things is so little that you can actually do it. And this is why, like from a startup perspective, you see a lot of foreign investments coming in, like foreigners coming in, they're doing their startups here because they can fail and learn, or they can succeed, fail and learn relatively cheap.
Very quickly as well.
Very, very quickly as well. And they can easily see whether or not like this has legs, or if it's just a bit too early into the market coming through. But there comes like difficulties as well, like trying to find source talent, for instance. Like people might feel like, oh, Vietnam, it's really cheap labor. Developers, I heard they're really good. I can get a cheap, just get a cheap developer in comparison to Australia. It's like, kind of, but not really. Like all the really good ones are like taken over by the big players, like Facebook, for instance. They're making it and so you've got this, the rest, right? But the rest, it's just, it's a big gap between what's good and what's the rest here. So that's the pitfalls when it comes to hiring overseas talent to kind of help with their startups. So that's what I've kind of observed working with and looking towards foreign-based startups based here in Vietnam. Actually, you mentioned something that was really, really cool, which was before going to grassroots. The reason why you want to go grassroots is because if you go through like the traditional route, you don't have the credentials that the established players already have. And I think, and maybe you can, I would love to hear your thoughts. I believe it's a mentality point of view. It's a cultural mentality point of view. And what I mean by that is Australia is somewhat risk adverse when it comes to investing into new things. And that's what I kind of see. Like you're seeing now, like we're still investing in mining and resource. And it's like, oh, really? Like coal? We're still investing into coal. Like, what's going on? What about renewable energy and stuff? And I know it's not to say that we don't do it as Australians, but it's just what you see right now, especially like in the finance market. Like when you look at startups within like fintech perspective, there's just so much regulation, so much checks and balances that need to get through. It's almost like it almost blunts the idea in itself, but it's also understandable if you come from a very compliant driven mentality, such as culture, such as finance as well. But what's your thoughts on that?
Okay, I think there, like, if we talk specifically about fintech, I think the regulations are absolutely needed. Otherwise, things just go so crazy and it's uncontrollable, right? Okay, but there's another observation that I have, and I use this analogy all the time. Like, I tend to look at democracy, right? What's the basis of democracy? It's everyone have say,
Mhm.
and that's why I suggest startups to go grassroots, because if you have enough citizens buy in, to vote for you, then you get a better chance of going into power. Like, that's a very simplistic interpretation of it, using the democracy analogy, right?
Yep.
And that's why it's important. Like, you try to go into an existing system, right? And there are, let's say, two established players in the market. They're doing really well, and they're the pillars of the industry. And if they stuff up, like, what are the impacts of that industry? Think about it. Like, a lot of startup founders, they don't, oh, they're not doing so great. This is not good. This is not good. Like, it's easy to complain, but right, they have gone through so much learnings and time in establishing that kind of structure and ecosystem for any industry. If you look in any industry, it's the same, right? And the impact for our citizens and everything, like, it's big. So that's why they need to take caution. But it's not saying that they are not willing to innovate in that kind of sense, right? But it's just that it's not proven. It's very risky to change all of a sudden. Like, we need a plan. So the best plan, and this is actually an opportunity for a lot of entrepreneurs. So if you go, the grassroots way, like, I accumulate my user interest, like, through time, and you build a very good foundation. And then slowly you from a small player, you become a medium player, and then you get to know the industry a little bit more. You get to mingle with these people. You understand, oh, okay, those are the concerns behind what you're actually thinking, right? And these things I've just talked about, it takes years, right? But then at the end of the day, in the business world, you need bargaining chips. Like, what are your bargaining chips? Like, your idea on a napkin? Like, seriously? No. Like, that's not what you're going to put on the negotiating table with some of these industry leaders and also the government. So you need buy-in.
Yep. Okay. I understand that bit. Actually, this brings on to another point. Like, I would love to get your tips and ideas for any startup founders, any organizational business leaders, senior, middle management, even producers aspiring to be leaders. We're in this situation right now. Like, we're doing lockdown at the moment. Things are starting to ease up somewhat, but we're in this really uncharted waters. This kind of very uncertain time period at the moment. For businesses out there, irrespective whether or not they're startups or small business or like enterprise level, is there any advice that you want to give when it comes to overcoming adversity, like resilience and change, given your experience? Yeah,
I guess in particularly in the current situation, I think the most important thing for most businesses, regardless of where you are, right, is engagement with your customer. That's the most important thing, because the world has changed just because of the pandemic, right? The world has changed. And why has the world changed? It's because of people's mentality has changed. That's the most important thing. And you don't know what they're thinking right now. Like, we developed a business model 20 years ago, and it has been, smooth, and we've been, seeing month-on-month growth and everything, because the behavior and the mentality has not changed. And that's why you can have that kind of growth. But now, all of a sudden, it could mean whatever you've done in the last 20 years is not relevant anymore. Even when we come out from the other side, post-COVID-19, the world has already changed, because we as humans, like, our mentality has already changed. So now is the best time to engage with your customer as much as possible. And it's also a great time because some businesses actually fail. They for whatever reasons, they could have failed, or they could have closed down, or whatever. And what happens to their customers? Someone needs to serve them, right? but in a very different way. So now is the time to engage with the customer, really try to understand, what kind of hardships you experiencing right now, what has changed. You can do many different things, like not surveys, but you can do a lot of things to really understand your customer, and try to support them as much as possible. Because it's always when you have hardship, if I give you a hand, you'll probably remember me more than when you're doing really well and I come and congratulate you, right? So I think that is probably the number one advice I'll give to anyone out there. No matter what you're doing, like if you are exploring a new idea, this is a very good way to look for potential problems out there that is worthwhile for solving. I give you an example. Like I was coaching a very early startup, like recently, from the university. And initially, it's a team of three very brilliant university students, which has all kinds of different backgrounds. Like some of them have very deep technical knowledge, some of them have business background, and it's really good. Yes, very brilliant, smart kids. And they initially they wanted to do a solution, which is a marketplace where there are certain IoT algorithms on there, where you can, all the developers and all the stakeholders can come on this platform and utilize it and make things together. And I go like initially that was pre-pandemic, and I said, like, even so, like, this is just generic and you can't reach there day one. Like you got to find a specific problem where your different components can actually solve, and you got to go out there and manually do it once or twice or 10 times, 20 times yourself before you formalize it and systemize it and put it out there for other developers to follow some of the instructions and some of the frameworks that you have to develop them to use it, right? And I haven't met them for 4-5 weeks, and met with them again last night.
Right.
And now they told me, hey, taking advice, and we have found the right niche. And I go, what? It's great. What is it? And because of the lockdown, now that there are certain regulations on how many people can actually be present in a particular area, especially for licensed premises like bars and clubs and those league clubs and stuff like that. So that's where they have found a niche, and then easily they can adopt their algorithms, tapping into the existing security camera system, because it's all network and LAN, and all they have to do is just put an edge computer there, running their algorithms, and already using data that was available in the security system 90 days ago. They already analyzed, like their people flow and the capacity and everything, and train their algorithm in preparation for the lockdown laws to be lifted when people go out there. And the first thing that these licensed venues are going to face is they need to put a bouncer at every gate to say, oh, okay, no, we've got enough here. Let's wait. So now with that kind of technology, they can really do automatic alerts, or boom gates or whatever. Like, it makes it so much easier, and it's so much more accurate as well. And this is a classic example of, during tough times, you engage with your customer, you talk to them, and try to understand their real pain point, and also forecast what's going to happen next after whatever it is finished, right? And another example is a lot of restaurants are already looking to implement automatic doors in bathrooms. Because that's what I meant by, the mentality has changed. Oh, hygiene, sanitization, like somehow it's already very embedded. Like, even though, like, this is all over and people still have that kind of, okay, automatic door, great. Like, I like going to that restaurant. Like, subconsciously, it makes a very big difference.
Yeah, actually, you made a good point. The hierarchy of needs have changed given what's going on with COVID, and therefore your customers or your potential customers' mentality of a product or a service and its importance relative to everything else has also changed as well. And therefore, as a startup, looking to either build a product or pivot off an existing product or existing service into something else that solves a problem within society, I think that's that's really good. And you made a really good analogy, really good story with regards to that with the university. Is it University of Sydney or
University of New South Wales?
University of New South Wales. Hey, so I know we're finishing up really soon, but what's your thoughts with regards to startups, the environment over the next 6 months, like to the rest of the end of this year? What do you think the predictions are with regards to startups?
The predictions for startups. I think first thing comes to mind, it would be extremely difficult to get capital.
Right.
I think that's everyone knows about that one. But like one piece of advice for founders, actually looking to raise capital, for all the VCs out there and the investors, they are actually looking at, like, they're observing. They're observing two things. One is the market in general. Like we talked about the change. Like we don't know what's going to change in, like, some industry might be entirely wiped out. We don't know, right? So that's one thing they are, taking a step back and just trying to observe. And the second thing is they're looking for winning teams, right? Who are the winning founding team that can ride through the waves? Like, got resilience. It's got creative methodologies in looking at the burn rate. Like how do you manage your burn rate in such a big crisis time? And if you can manage them well during this pandemic, the likelihood of you succeeding in the next 10 years is so much greater. So investors actually at the moment, they are not shying away from deal flow. They are still talking to making interactions with potential startups. But their focus has shifted somehow, right? Instead of looking at growth, like that's probably not the first thing they would put as a priority. But rather, like, what are your plans? Do you have a plan B or plan C, right? Do you have a cockroach, a survival mode, right? How are you going to cut down on expenses? Like I've met another team the other day. Like they made some really big decisions just because of that, because they are so committed in their startup. One, like, they're two co-founders, right? One of them it's got a wife and kid, and they've made a really big decision to move back with the in-laws.
Wow.
Big decision. The second co-founder is another guy. His wife has made a decision to go into full-time employment, so the husband can actually focus full-time on the startup. And they have, just by doing that, they have created a runway of 12 months for themselves.
Wow.
Just like that. Those are very big decisions, but imagine from an investor point of view, wow, you guys did that during the pandemic, right? So it says something about this team and your commitment into your solution, and your confidence, and the agility of you being able to handle also your personal lives in actually balancing that with what you're doing in the commercial world, and that's quite something.
Wow, that's really, really good. Hey, so I know we're running out of time, but Jonathan, for anyone who wants to reach out to you or connect with you, what's the best channels to do that?
Right. I always prefer LinkedIn. So just search for Jonathan Chak on LinkedIn. You should be able to find me. I'm very open to connecting to other entrepreneurs or basically anyone. Like I'm open for opportunities. And also you can check out my website, www.s3group.com.au. Great.
Thank you so much. I'll put that in the show notes below. So thank you so much with it. For everyone else, looking forward to your feedback and everything like that. And until then, I'll see you in the next video. See you guys.